Welcome to Adjusted Reality, a podcast series trusted by the adjusted and brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress, where we learn from athletes, celebrities, influencers, and healthcare professionals about how to optimize health in a fun, relatable way. Join me, Dr. Sherry McAllister, as I welcome back Dr. Susie Carmack. Dr. Carmack is the Department Chair of Yoga Therapy and Ayurveda for the Maryland University of Integrated Health, where she directs and teaches in the MUIH accredited graduate programs in yoga therapy and Ayurveda. Recognized as a global pioneer and thought leader in the promotion of well-being in the workplace, Dr. Carmack is the author of 2 best-selling books that translate yoga philosophy and practices for the public. Well-Being Ultimatum, which is the one we're really going to focus on today. And if you didn't listen to the first one, go back because it'll set you up for success in listening to this one. And that's on genius breaks. Her next book, Yoga for One, How to Co-Create an Inclusive and Evidence-Informed Practice on and off the mat. This will be published by Singing Dragon in 2024. Dr. Carmack maintains a private practice in yoga therapy and yoga professional education through her yoga company, YogaMedCo, and lectures internationally. I am so excited to welcome you back, Dr. Carmack.
Well, I was honored to get invited to come in the first place, given you are who you are, given the space you create in this community through your podcast, and given the nature of the life you lead. And so to be invited once was a dream come true. It feels even more meaningful, more deeply meaningful to be invited back. So thank you for that invitation. And I'm honored to be here to support you and your listeners.
It's fantastic. And we're now in 101 countries. So it's a beautiful message that you will be sharing with our audience today. And we want to kick it off. We have so much to cover. And this book really touched me. And I shared to you that I did around a very quick tour around half the world in 7 days, over 15,000 miles from Ohio to Delaware, over to San Francisco, into Sydney, and then the Coolangatta, Australia, and back. And nothing could please me more than to be able to be back and grounded and read this book on the airplane. So appreciation is returned full force. And we're going to jump right into this one. This was a book that you wrote that I look back and I think it is more prevalent now than ever. This message that you have put together, I call it a masterpiece. And why? When you look at Renaissance art, you see the reflection, and there's wisdom in masterpieces that are timeless. And this one, for my listeners right now, this is a timeless piece. I want to jump into some tough questions just by the title itself, Well-Being Ultimatum. I get this question a lot, Dr. Carmack. I want you to address wellness and well-being for our audience.
Well, I sure will, and humbled by your generous words there. Thank you. We'll get to kind of where I was when I wrote the book. So it's I'm having a time-space continuum moment, looking back and collectively as well as personally, but I'll stay focused on your question. I think, there's a couple of things to say about the title, right? So wellness and well-being are terms that we go in and out of as a kind of global conversation, using them interchangeably. Almost like a light bulb interchange, wellness, well-being. And those of us who are in the space of promoting them very, very specifically, you get behind the scenes and we have really strong opinions about how they're not the same, more than we do about how they are the same. And so that gets really complicated, right? If we're serving the public, and I know your listeners are doing that through their, healthcare practices for the most part, that it's interesting to think about what someone's coming to us for and what they think they're getting versus what we think we're giving to them. And so it's a powerful thing to think about. What are we talking about? And what do we mean by the words we use? So when I was on my dissertation track journey, I was basically in the space of wanting to figure that out and kind of get to collective meaning on those actually three words: health, wellness, and well-being. There was a lot of math in that, surprisingly, trying to get a state of the art on what that is. Where I landed personally is a couple things. One, we all think they're different, so we're already in trouble in terms of shared understanding. To your question. Two, personally decode wellness as about the strategy for how we optimize our health. And that's on that illness wellness continuum, as it's called. Are we trying to prevent things from happening by healthy behavior? Are we trying to manage things that we already know are happening? We'll call those illnesses. Are we trying to provide comfort for someone who has something that's chronic and isn't going away? So it's not about preventing it or getting rid of it. It's about managing within it. Or are we trying to create comfort as the decline goes further? So it's a sliding scale. And it's interesting to think of that from more of that behavioral strategy space. So to me, when I hear wellness, that's what I pick up. What are you doing or not doing that's in your best interest? And for those that you have an impact on in the short term and the long term, doing things that aren't so good for us in the short term, things we use in coping that might not be in our best interest, but solve the stress problem in the moment. It's important that maybe isn't wellness, right? If we're doing X, Y, Z, too much of it. So anyway, so there's a lot to say there, but I'll try to kind of wrap that there in. It's the doings. As the name implies, well-being is how are we being well within that? And what I've always been fascinated with in my own work, and then more recently coming into the science of strategically promoting it, is that once again, we don't get to say what someone is or isn't in well-being. It's their personal definition. The well-being scholars out there, the happiness scientists, the quality of life folks, everyone geeks out and has kind of a corner on where they think it is or isn't. And as I politely say in my dissertation, I'm not coming in here to start a street fight. Okay. Y'all can keep doing what you're doing. But as an interpretive scholar, someone who believes that someone's reality is defined by them as an individual and how they're co-creating that in their lived experience, I don't get to tell someone what their well-being is. What I want to know is, do you feel like it's there or not? And then let's figure out how you feel. Can you get it back? And that's where the subjective well-being comes in. How are we, it really goes into how I defined it and have defined it since then, is how we are living in the life story that we want to be living in. And how are we in a place of congruence in the story we have within ourselves, the story we are sharing with others that are meaningful to us, and the way we go about our identity in the world. I feel that the story plays a really big piece in this. As someone who's in a chronic condition, how they're doing, how they're being, and their medical chart may have some things concerning on it. And how are they in the space of the storytelling? Are they in the framing of the illness has got them? Are they in the framing of they're fighting that illness? Are they in the framing of they're working through it so they can go help others with it? We know from narrative medicine that the simple shifts, which aren't so easy, but the very clear shifts of framing our story that we're telling to ourselves, the way we make sense of our lives, really makes an impact on how we create well-being. So that led me to landing on well-being as how we make sense of our story. And that's our health outcomes, our identity, the challenges that we're facing and the plot twists of our lives, which are successful plot twists. Wow, I had this great thing happen and it's asking so much of me. And the not so fun plot twists that we really wish would exit stage left, thank you, the stuff we have to deal with that we don't like. And so long answer to your question, but let's land on wellness as the doings or the not doings that are in our best interest in the short and long term, and the well-being as how are we telling the story about our lived experience within to ourselves, to spirit, depending on that belief system, and how we're living that in the world. How are we being in the doing? And how well is that going or not?
outstanding. How are we being in the doing? And just stop and reflect. That is a very powerful statement, because when we read the title of your book, we know it's for strategic healers. And one of the pieces that I want to stress is that it's a strategic healer as defined in your book as someone caring for the public, someone who's caring for someone else. But I want to stretch the title just a little bit, because as an audience listening, you may be coming from a completely different walk of life. And we're going to adjust that reality for you, as she just said. How are you being in the doing is where are you coming from? And that well-being answer was so critical, because as we look through the continuum of where you are and where you want to go, this conversation is going to be a very authentic conversation and reflect on you. You are the one that's listening today and what this means to you. And a lot of times when we're trying to help someone else, we get into the superhero mentality. And I want her to start at the very top. What is a superhero? Because I can tell you with certainty, many of you right now would not call yourself that. But once you hear what she has to say, you're going to reflect on your life. And so many of you out there, I'm going to adjust it right now. You are, in fact, a superhero. So, Dr. Carmack, explain what a superhero is.
Well, thank you. And it is interesting to think about, we're having this conversation to the folks listening, each individual listener, and their ears may be in the space of underneath the hat of being the professional that goes out and does the things, the boss, the chiropractor, the professional, the public health advocate, what's that role, that hat you're wearing, as we even say, right? But like, take off the hat for a second and let's get in there. Okay. So, this idea of superhero, and I've even heard it used in the lexicon since writing the book. I'm going to be a good yogi and not take credit for that. But I think it's interesting when we start a conversation, how sometimes it continues, and I'm all for that. That's actually what I was hoping to stimulate, and others have too. So I'm not trying to take that monkey on my back. So I'm going to be careful there. But so there's this condition that is a bona fide, in the psychology space. I'm not a psychologist, so let me be careful here. But a hero syndrome, without the super part, is someone who kind of stimulates trouble, oversimplifying it, and then goes in and solves it. And they kind of get connected into that kind of dance, right? And, it's a syndrome. It's not a disease. But it's a pattern that we got to address. So I started thinking about it, not in the kind of blaming and shaming space by any means, but really thinking about in my own journey, and I'll tell you more about that too, both as an external burnout scientist that I had somehow become, and also in the looking at my own life and taking off all my own hats, that there's this thing that those of us are wired to be of service, capital S. We are not doing this just as a job. We love our clients. We love the problems that we get to solve with them and for them and support them in. We love what we do. We are called to action in a space of being that person that serves. Okay. So if we kind of extrapolate that call to action, what do superheroes do? There's the beacon, the old days. I'm old enough to remember the old version of Batman with the thing in the sky, and I can't even keep up with how cool and modern superheroes are today, but get really comic strip with me, oh no, the metropolis is in trouble. We need someone to help us. And in comes the superhero who magically has and beautifully has, everything that needs to be solving of the problem. They have superhero strength. They have superhero creativity. They have ingenuity for days. They are, they kind of just know coming in, not only that they can do it, but how to do it, where to do it, and they got it, right? And many of us have that in our DNA, okay, metaphysical. We're here in this time and space because we were put in, like the all-star team, to be working on some things, depending on your belief system, respectfully. It's my belief that these things that we love doing in flow are actually because we got some programming in there that's way beyond us, right? So here's the critical thing though. Unlike the comic strip superheroes or even the movie ones, we don't have a human performance system that is, immortal, or we don't have a superhero suit like the ones that have those, right? We have a human performance system that needs to, I don't know, sleep, would like to have dinner with their family every now and then, maybe all the time, that gets emotional and has many things happening, great stuff happening at home against hard stuff at work, great stuff at work against hard things at home, needing to have space for ourselves, wanting to be all in our relationships, like, where is the metropolis? Like, we all have all these different places that we want to be. And it's like, we want to, and we're wired for, and we're even built for answering the call. Call me at 2 a.m. I'm there. We're the helpers. Okay. And, a lot has been said about, oh, someone's a people pleaser. Like, can we please just stop the shaming about it? Like, no, like we want to go help people. We want to go help that metropolis, whether that's a human individually or a group. And so we got a conundrum here, because the superhero syndrome is not this hero that generated a problem so they can go in and solve it and feel better about themselves. And I don't mean to be dismissive to that kind of indirectly there. It's like, we didn't create the problem. The problem is happening. The problem that we care about in the world, that we'd like to make a difference in. And we're hardwired to go in and help folks. So we got really, we got like 3 stimuli going on that are pushing us into the predication of burnout. In a nutshell, we love what we do. When you do things that are meaningful and you love them and you keep doing them, your well-being gets high, right? In a good way, goes higher. We know we're solving problems, so we feel good about the fact we're making an impact, and the world never sleeps. And as part of that, the world is not encouraging us to slow down, especially if we're the ones that are going in when everyone in the metropolis is wondering, how are we doing this? And we're the people going in. And so that creates, it's not that we want to turn that off, which is, I think, when people hit the wall of burnout, they think, well, I've got to stop doing this because I can't keep doing that. It's more so about, okay, we need a superhero operating system. We need to help this human performance system be able to show up when the call is there, and also to know when to call another superhero, so that we don't literally have to take the weight of the world on our shoulders, as the saying goes. And so, so superhero syndrome is not a disease pattern. It's not anything, I'm not a psychologist, so I'm not trying to pretend I'm not. But it's a pattern that I see with people who love what they do, who care about making impact in the world, and who are, basically getting successful at that. That's all outflow. And if we don't have some time for them to have inflow and to recalibrate themselves and their human performance system, otherwise known as their mind and body and heart and spirit, then the stamina at some point is going to not be available. And that's where we hit burnout. So the notion of a well-being ultimatum is that it's not like someone's giving us an ultimatum. It's like having a deal with ourselves that, yes, I want to keep going out there and doing the superhero things, but I'm not going to lie to myself and pretend like I am a superhero, because I'm not. I'm a human that's immortal, that doesn't care if anyone else is watching, and needs to be able to have the stamina to keep doing this. Because I know that if I don't have that sense of inflow to complement the outflow, not only am I not going to be good for anyone, and the metropolis is going to be let down at some point, I'm not having any fun anymore. So I got a couple of things in there and on top of the question, but it was something that I saw as a pattern in my clients. And frankly, it was something I saw as a pattern within myself. So it was, writing it in the book was about almost proposing it as something I was seeing as a phenomena. And then as people have read the book and I've gotten the chance to do some work around it, it's both unfortunate and fortunate that's confirmed, because it gives us a structure to be able to go after something that I personally didn't see us talking about enough.
Absolutely right. And this is why we started with the structure. We kind of wireframed wellness and well-being for a purpose, so that when the listener has the reflection of where they are and what the big setup is and how they are creating their reality of daily life, there is many that do not see the work that they do and how important it is. And then there are those that see the work that they're doing, but it's starting to fatigue them. And you created this understanding of what that means, because purpose-driven life is critical. And there are pieces in a purpose-driven life, and one that when you're fully fulfilled, yet you're doing so much that you have to now reflect on the keywords that come back to me, which is addressing burnout and compassion fatigue. And these are very separate. And for people to now look at what you were talking about in that purpose-driven life, I think we have a critical component to be able to now reflect on burnout. How does it happen? Compassion fatigue. What is it? And what are some of the symptoms that often will show up physically in our bodies? So I'm going to turn that over to you on how you look at this.
Well, thank you. And I think it is, and that purpose piece you picked up is it that intersectionality of wellness and well-being, right? We know that when we're living a life of purpose, realizing it's not just about us, right? We're connecting into social support and social connection, which is, a hallmark of lifestyle medicine, actually. Like, we're starting to actually recognize that feeling supported and giving support, not in a kind of expectation-based or transactional way, but feeling like we've got you and you're part of helping someone else feel like someone's got them, that's as much a piece of our longevity, even our wellness and our health impacted, as well as our well-being. But kind of getting back to what you're saying, so it's like, okay, we ran, we took that algebra and we ran with it. I'm going to jump metaphors all over the place here, as I usually do.
I love it.
Forgive me. So forgive me, folks. You got a right brainer talking, and it's not so linear, but it usually comes back together somehow. uh, so it's like we ran that down. It's like, okay, human, you're in charge of doing stuff that helps humans, and you're purpose driven in that, and we're going to give you some big problems to solve, but you got this, and you'll be able to figure it out, and spirit and source will be there to help you when you need it. It's like, got it, got my moving out orders, as they would say in the military. So we keep going, and it's like, and guess what? You do something well, you're going to be asked to do more of it. And it just gets bigger and bigger. It gets wider, or more volume, more depth, or both. And you're solving things, and then that feels good, that purpose-driven life. So where that goes then, when I kind of make that analogy of the human performance system, I'm using that kind of framing very intentionally, because I want us to all go into the metaphor of a car. Okay. So if you're driving, like, it doesn't matter how many years you've been driving, how awesome you are at driving, the road's terrain is going to impact the trip, right? But at some point or another, that car can only do so much if it is on a road that is conducive to its continued movement, its forward velocity, and B, if there's gas in the car. Mm-hmm. So the metaphor there, burnout and compassion fatigue feel like, to get to your symptom question, what do these things feel like? Actually, the way they present, which is how we feel them in our lives and bodies, whether or not we know that's what it is, how they present is like the slowing down or the shutting down of the car. So I'm going to talk kind of metaphysically about each version. Burnout shows up, the de-identification is the fancy word for not feeling if this is me anymore, not feeling like I can do this anymore. It's like, I don't know if I want to wear that hat anymore. And we know that burnout is a driver for people to not only leave a job, but a profession. New teachers burn out within the first 5 years, and that was before the pandemic. Okay, just to kind of set a scene. And we have healthcare, education, military shortages, unlike we've ever seen. And those are just a few of the purpose fields, right? So people hit this wall of burnout. It's not just they don't like their boss, which is the number one reason why people leave a job. Sorry, not sorry. And as a boss, I don't like that, but I have to own that, right? But it's also about leaving the profession. Like, I'm taking off the costume, I'm taking off the superhero outfit, I'm out. So de-identification, cynicism, and exhaustion. Exhaustion, I think we can get. This is a different level of tired. Like, we had to put some hours in extra on the weekend that we're going to all pretend like we're not doing. Yeah, you probably are. Okay. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about an under residual fatigue that happens. Even athletes, if you overtrain them, they get performance fatigue, and they actually make more mistakes and don't perform as well. So that kind of capital E exhaustion. And the third one is cynicism. And suddenly the very population or public or individuals they loved working with, suddenly there's this almost kind of snarkiness that starts to come up. And, like, as a teacher who's had burnout in the past, like, I love my students and I started hating my students. Like, I love them. And, oh no, I don't want to read these papers. Okay. Like, I started to get a little cynical. There's no other, term that I've got right now. So any one, two, or all three of those, that's the burnout space. The metaphor for burnout, though, is that the road that you're on somehow had some mud and you got stuck. So what happens with the high driver, literally think about the terms, the high driving achiever, what are they going to do? I'm stuck. They don't see the fact it's the road's fault. I'll tell you what the road is in a minute. What do? Keep pushing on the gas. Oh, I just got to power through this. I just got to power through this big deadline that I'm working on. I just got to power through the fact that, yeah, I got all these papers to grade, but I'll be able to relax tomorrow. You see, right? So it's this gas. But the problem, and anyone that's seen a car stuck in mud knows, that's just what's that going to do? Have mud spitting all over the place and wear out your engine and, not going to get anywhere. So we know in the science of burnout that the people who are most likely to burn out in an organization are the people who care the most and who want to make change happen the best. And who's that? We're back to that superhero again. And so it's about fixing the road. And anyone that has ever had a car stuck knows, what do you do? The best way to get out of that predicament is take a step back, take a look at what's going on, figure out what needs to happen in the terrain, and get some help to get some leverage. And that's really where part of the burnout solution comes in. And then learning personally how not to push on the gas so hard, like we did when we first learned how to drive, right? So it's that holistic thing of having some help, of taking a step back and taking a good look and not doing it alone. That's part of the solution. And that's where, we did for Well-Being Ultimatum. Compassion fatigue, we could do a whole separate talk on. For time, I'll be shorter in the explanation, but it feels the same. It feels exhausting. It feels like we're drained. And it's the metaphor of there's no gas in the tank. So the road's fine and we're going forward and we kind of look like a duck and sound like a duck, changing metaphors. And it seems like everything's fine on the outside. We might even be hitting our deadlines and our performance outcomes and all that fancy, but we're just feeling really tired and fatigued. And it's like the gas tank starts to feel like it's going down. At some point, we do hit the wall where the car, that is the body vehicle, can't do it. And that's where it gets that much more difficult. Compassion fatigue is a secondary traumatic stress disorder. And there's a lot to it. And I'm, going to be as succinct as I can, but it's not that easy to kind of go into. So I want to be respectful to the phenomena. But I will say that it's the metaphor, it's sometimes called caregiver syndrome. When we love someone and they're at the bed and we're there for them, we've got to have a nurse come in and say, hey, will you go downstairs and get some food yourself? The patient will still be here. You need a break as the person that's holding vigil over the bedside. And in much the same way, those of us in the helping profession specifically, we are kind of in that caregiver role, not a family member. So to be clear, but we're in that giving and that attending to, supporting of the problem space. And that could be an individual patient or client, or that could be a problem. A public health worker could be a whole metropolis that they're working with. So it's like that, never wanting to, having that compassion flow so freely and wanting to be supportive of the problem and the people who are facing it, and getting so caught up in it that eventually our system needs some gas. We need to go downstairs to the cafeteria and eat some cheap food. Actually, healthy food would be better, but let's get real, right? But the metaphor of that, right? Like you need some gas. What do you need to restore your system so it can operate again? And it's going to feel a little wrong because we know the patient's still there. We know the problem is still there. Whatever it was that we were giving compassion to isn't going away, and it's not getting any easier. And we don't is of Wonder Woman or Superman saying, sorry, I'm busy tonight, I can't do that. Okay, but we got to get, from our human performance system standpoint, if we want the stamina to continue, we need time to pull over. So if you look at them both against each other, to prevent compassion fatigue or to manage it when it comes, we need to pull over and take care of the human system with what it's craving and what it needs and stop ignoring it. We need some inputs there. And if we're in a place where the road, the system that we're working in or the problem we're working on has gotten to the point that we're stuck trying to address it, then we need to pull over and take a look at it externally and get some help to figure out how we can go forward. And that's really, those two themes are meant to kind of holistically address this bigger phenomena of superhero syndrome, because at the end of the day, we're not giving ourselves the input of energy and input of human performance system needs because we're so busy with everyone else. We're not pulling over and taking a look at our own life in the same creative strategy that we've given to everything else we're working on because we're too busy doing that. Let's give that grace back to ourselves. And we're not willing to tell everyone else that we need some help too, because it makes us uncomfortable that we're letting the people we help down. And so those folks, if that's ringing true in any three circuits there, that's what the Well-Being Ultimatum is here to support you and not to judge you for, but to give you a structure to lean on if you find yourself in any of those three categories. Not enough time for self, not enough time for connection with others who might be having challenges, and not enough strategy for how to go in and address it.
Wow. Here's the wow that I heard is you brought this to a different level of it was literally like a movie in words. Is you created the frame to which you were going to paint, and that was the wellness and well-being. That's step one. Then you started to pick up the brush and share with our audience, here is the big picture of a superhero. And many of us had no idea we were superheroes. We were just passionate, love what we do, and we want the world to change for the better. We want everyone to feel the excitement and inspiration and motivation that we have every day. And so many of us are listening to this podcast right now. And now we have this opportunity to put another paintbrush dipped in a different color paint to look at what's the solution. The burnout and compassion fatigue is something that we don't talk about. And it's so incredibly important in the mental health realm. And today, ladies and gentlemen, like she said, and everyone that has had moments of reflection in their life where, to lose someone who is a superhero and completely out of a profession would be devastating. And so, Dr. Susie Carmack, we are so grateful that you can recognize it and you would never leave. And we also want to bring forth this notion that we all need help. You use the word grace, and I love that word. Grace that we can find for ourselves to be able to continue to give, but with a reflection on a solution to fill the gas tank and recognize what, in fact, car we're driving. Because if you're driving a Ferrari down a dirt, rocky road, there's going to be some challenges, and we can reflect on that. You also want to recognize that there's people around you that will say, it would be best if you drove a four-wheeler, a 4x4 down that road. And that's the beauty of networking, that consistency, and why I wanted to bring you back, because you were the person who reflected for me the most of what car are you driving? Like, where are you, Sherry? Are you driving the Ferrari down a dirt path, really rocky road? Or did you choose to put yourself into this 4x4 and make a better journey that maybe have a different outcome? And do you have the right gas? Do you have what it's going to take to make the difference? And the audience reflecting on, where are you in your life? What vehicle are you driving? Is it the vehicle of choice to get you where you want to go, which is the well-being path? Now I want to also bring up mental health and how that impacts our world. And now that I have had an opportunity to see the post-pandemic world, and being in Sydney, Australia, and listening to a bus driver use some very unfortunate words to another bus driver while trying to pull into the airport, I stopped for a moment and thought, this is not the same world. The post-pandemic world needs more love. It needs more happiness. And there's two words that came at our first meeting together, and I love the two words. I love them because they're so different, and yet people use them interchangeably. Let's talk about happiness and joy. And I like to say that happiness feeds joy. So share with our audience where you are with that, because it's also grown over the time that you've written the book into where you are today.
Absolutely. Well, you're right. We are impacted by world events. We are impacted by what's happening with others who we work with, who we play with, who we love, whether they're physically, geographically with us or otherwise. The phenomena of stress contagion and well-being contagion, this whole thing about, like, when I was a kid, oh, I'll send you good vibes. Like, there's actually some science in that, right? Both on the receiving and on the sending end. So we impact each other and we feel it, whether or not we have consciousness of it. There's so much in that, really. So, you're calling out that, like, this time and space that we're in right now, trying to keep doing this superhero work in a way that we don't burn out in, because the world needs us now more than ever. Like, it's all kind of full circle, right? And it's that much more complicated and difficult because, it's like when in the first year of the pandemic, someone said, well, let's talk about the fact that we're not just working online during a pandemic. We're working during a pandemic, like, we're going through a global hard thing, and we're trying to pretend like our human system isn't dealing with the stress of that, the ways we live, all of that. So anyway, so it's not, we can kind of catalog and inventory all the reasons why it's that much harder now, or different, at least harder in a different way, maybe. And grounding from the fact that wherever that car is and whatever, car we're driving, whether the terrain we're in, by the way, that's like the system that you're working in. If the system you're working in is set up for your success, it's like the Indy 500. If the system that you're working in has some problems and some headaches, then, you're going off road, right, to make change happen. So you need a four-wheeler. I love that. We'll have to keep doing that. But where this all goes too is kind of like, why am I driving in the first place? And when did this stop being fun? And where am I lit up? Like, burnout, when you get to the point of burnout, we keep pushing on the gas. We didn't get to the next piece. You finally get to the point where you get out of the car and look at it and go, what the hell am I doing? Like, I'm just going to go get out of this car and just start doing something else. And this isn't fun anymore. And the poor car, and so, or the compassion fatigue, I'm pulling over and I can't do anything. I'm still going to have to leave. So this kind of exodus that happens in both cases, and part of that happens because we need to set up the terrain as best we can. Organizational support matters here. People can't do it alone. We need to make sure we're not alone in the car, because if you have someone else driving, guess what? Or with you, guess what? They can, take a leg and you can share. And this is a privileged reference, so I want to just kind of call that out, right? Not everybody has a car. But all that to say, where I kind of got into is like, well, the irony that we're lit up by this purpose-driven work we're doing and all the things we've talked about already, and then that light literally burns out. Like, from the metaphor of that light can burn out easily if we're not taking good care of ourselves. And so part of the healing space, the solution space, in yoga, we like to think of healing. It's not so much about curing as it is about healing. And healing, to quote Dr. Jessica Char, who's one of the kind of a descendant of some of the really big yoga masters that have been in our lineage, in the world's lineage of yoga. Healing is a change of mind. Okay, so like, how can we change a mind? An adjusted reality, and I didn't set that up, but that's for sure.
Well done.
So yeah, so you're welcome. But I'm being real. Like, it's the idea of how can I change my mind about this? How can I go about it? So that's where in the book, I try to offer like, look, I'm not going to come in here and tell you that you've got to stop doing that job. I'm not going to come in because I know that it's actually a big piece of who you are. I'm not going to come in there and tell you that, you need to go do some kind of advocacy campaign and help everyone else with it. Actually, we're just going to start right here. Charity begins at home, and think about, okay, take a good look. If you had to say, how are you doing on these 3 columns? How are we doing? And notice I'm not saying you should be doing. Like, take a personal look at the human performance system that is you. How are we doing on self-care? And not like the image we have of self-care, like someone sitting with slippers in a spa, or, the word self-care has kind of got a bad rap, especially during the pandemic. But, what literally feels caring and feels like input to you. If I'm making dinner for my kids, my kids are older now, but like back in the day, if I was making dinner for my kids, that's not self-care. That's me caring for them. Right. So we kind of easily conflate what that is, but what feels nurturing to you, what feels receiving energy to you, what helps you to feel restored, reset, all of that. That's in the self-care bucket. Is it about having a long list of things you're supposed to do every day and then feeling like a failure when you can't? Nope. The idea is to think about what for right now that dynamically changes. What could that be for you today? Let's do one thing for self-care for the day. And there's a lot of ways that can show up. 10 deep breaths would count. Would I like you to also get some exercise and some sleep and all those other lifestyle medicine bells and whistles? Sure. And if the day is such that we need 10 deep breaths to feel like you can give yourself some grace, okay, winning. The second column is social support. One thing I noticed in my own burnout journey is that this is hard. I say in the book, this is hard for me to admit. What is it like when you're studying a phenomena and then you realize in the study of it that you have it? That was me. So I realized that I was canceling, like the critical moment for me was I was canceling coffee dates with my friends, and I was not canceling them with my people that I was doing work with or business development with. And that was a really hard moment. Like that was like putting the x-ray up of my priorities when I came to that moment. And so all that to come clean about it, and not to say that this is about, oh, well, we have to have a big list of friends. They have to be awesome. And no, like, what are you doing to both feel that, yeah, you're helping friends out, but you know what, that's still some output. And purpose-driven folks in their work, we got to be a little careful with that we don't want to start tallying and keeping score in our friendships. If I give you this, so I want you to give that back to me. Like, that's just manipulation. That's not what I'm talking about. It's a matter of feeling a sense of that we can receive. We can be messy. I call them the backstage people. Like, you're not out on stage performing life. Can you be backstage and someone's helping you, to fix your superhero costume so you can get back out there? All right. So how are we taking time to receive social support? It doesn't have to be a big fancy thing, but how are we opening ourselves up? Because we do know from a mental health perspective, the precarious place for the superhero syndrome is that, from a mental health lens, is that we do know that folks in this space can also get into some really scarier places like maladaptive perfectionism, and even suicidal ideation. We have people who are very successful in their careers and in their work that are also having severe mental health disturbances. And part of it's because they're used to success and they're not used to talking about the problem space. And they also feel the servant leaders especially are afraid to let anyone down by the pulling over. So the ask here of having social support gets us into the space of having, it's good for its own right. It's a beautiful thing. And it's objectivity, because in the kind of darker corner room of happiness study is this kind of weird place where when people are doing things that are not in their best interest, but no one's stopping them, and they feel good when they do them, they'll keep doing them and keep running into a negative space. This is how the beginning of addiction starts. This is how the beginning of, workaholism starts, et cetera. And so having objectivity, having someone to say, how are you? And you say, fine. And they say, really? Mm-hmm. Having a place to be able to diffuse that is protective. and helps us to maybe prevent things from escalating that turn into secrets that really can be heavy on us and turn into some much harder places. It helps us to feel the benefit of social support as well. And then the third column is, how are we doing with services? And, we can go more into that in a moment, but that's the idea that whether there's a thriving scale, it's basically surviving to thriving. And people who thrive if purpose during the pandemic got to a place where it was kind of funky. We were supposed to keep thriving and keep helping people, especially those of us in the health space. And at the same time, we were feeling like we were barely surviving. And whether or not we're in a surviving and thriving space, that slides around. Okay. And it's not about how fancy our job is or anything like that. So wherever we are, we need help. I am not at a place where, I just adore and respect Oprah. Like, Oprah has her people, right? It's like, she's not doing it all herself. Like, she has folks that help me with this and folks that help me with that. And she is shining her light on all the folks. And she's not trying to, do all the things by herself. And I'm, outside in, of course, I don't know her, but the idea of that is like, whether you're a thriving person, at some point, you're going to need some help to take things to the next level. Or whether you're in a surviving mode of, wow, I have been doing this and I don't know if I can keep doing this, or at least I need some help with this. Help services matter. And so services can be anything that's going to help bring us back to, guess what? Wellness, and feeling like we don't have to be alone in the solution, because that's our kryptonite for superheroes. To talk specifically about Superman, our kryptonite is when we come back to the pattern of, oh, I need to do this alone. I can't bother them with this. If I don't do this, no one else will. There's about 20 different, mantras that go on in our head that pull us out of asking for help. And it's counterintuitive as the helper to be asking. And I'm here to say that it's better for everyone, including you, and that's the most important thing, to not be alone. So have your backstage people where you can be messy and you can help them. And it's more transactional. Peer-to-peer support is what we call that in the literature. Okay. And there are professional peer coaches actually, but I'm just talking real deal friends and family, ones that are giving, and you're having giving and receiving with, and no one's kind of keeping score. Because that gets weird. And family doesn't have to be biological. So let's keep going with that. Services, professionals. And the framing I use in the book is like, people who get to a certain matter of success, and yeah, there's some privilege in there, so I want to own that too. They will, they will not think twice about having people subcontract work with them at the office, or even at home, like someone to help them with their nails or their lawn, a nice developed world thing, right? But then they don't think about having services to help them with their mental health support. Maybe there's a counselor needed, maybe there's a coach needed to help you with behavior change. I could keep going on, but we got to take a look at the big picture of what's happening. What can I do? Self-care, the person asking of themselves, what can I kind of be opening up to talk about the problem space with social support? And how can I go and get some services to help me so I don't have to do this alone? And there's the sidebar benefit of, it's a lot more efficient when we go to the people who are experts in the thing. So
I absolutely love how we drilled into so much of the importance. And oftentimes I ask my guest to kind of drill out some homework, but I think this time I'm gonna be the homework advocate for them. Is, if you heard what Dr. Susie Carmack has said, and you're recognizing you're somewhere that perhaps you would like to engage further, maybe drive faster, maybe change the car, maybe really recognize where you are in your life, then the book, The Well-Being Ultimatum, is 100% your homework assignment. There's a page, it's page 68 in the book, that talks about 7 places you need to go on a daily basis. I love it. But I'm going to tease the audience on that one, because I think at some point we take action as the superhero, and there you are listening today all the way through this longer podcast, hearing how each of us can be reflective on our kryptonite and where we're at. And Dr. Susie Carmack has made it real, authentic, okay to be who we are and have the moments of truth, the backstage pass with someone who can zip up a broken zipper and someone who can wipe the tears. And they're all okay, because at the end of the day, you are not alone. You can choose to be by yourself, but please do not choose to be alone, where you keep these unfortunate secrets. Dr. Susie Carmack, wow. I cannot wait till next year. Yes, my audience, we are going to have another book by this fabulous author. And it's going to be an exciting time, because when this new book comes out, it's co-creation. It's bringing yoga to another place for us. And if you're a chiropractor out listening, and what does this mean for you? It means we're going to create an inclusive and evidence informed practice on and off the mat. And that I can't wait for. Dr. Susie Carmack, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for giving me the chance to be here and for your very generous comments. I'd like to sneak in one last little bit, and
Yes,
that
please.
is the joy happens when we can have those moments of taking the step back to look, not in a critical place of thinking, oh no, I'm not doing this right. And oh no, I need to go faster. Or oh no, look at me, I'm stuck in the mud again. The part of the idea of why we're doing this is, let's receive the joy that comes with nurturing ourselves and give ourselves the same gift that we give others when we help them. The joy of knowing we can have a good cry and a smile inside the tears when we're connecting to our loved ones, and that social support. And the joy of knowing that we're giving others the space to help us. When we don't ask for help, we're robbing them of the opportunity of doing the helping, the very thing that we love to do. And in the space of Eastern medicine, reciprocity is where prosperity is. And so when we don't ask for help, we're stopping the flow. So I wanted to sneak that in, that this isn't just one more thing to do. This is a chance to connect to joy in those three circuits: the me, the we, and the us. And I appreciate you for having me today. Thank you.
Beautifully said. Thank you very, very much. We will be one more time bringing her back, I promise you, because I'm looking forward to this book. We enjoy that we could have you here today. And we thank you again, Dr. Susie Carmack.
Okay.
I want to thank you for tuning in to Adjusted Reality as we spoke to Dr. Susie Carmack about the Well-Being Ultimatum, a self-care guide for strategic healers and those who live in the service, leadership, and healing of others. This podcast was brought to you by the Foundation for Chiropractic Progress. As a special gift for listening today, you can visit f4cp.org/health to get a copy of our Mind, Body, Spirit ebook, which focuses on many ways to optimize your well-being and the ones you love, without the use of drugs or surgery. Now, please don't forget to subscribe. Share this podcast with family and friends. Who knows, in your circle, the superhero who may in fact be suffering and need your support. Don't forget to rate and review, because I'm looking at what you say to me as ammunition to build better and bigger and bolder podcasts for the future. Now, if you're feeling inspired to learn more about chiropractic, that's part of that service that everyone needs, or to find a doctor of chiropractic near you, you can visit f4cp.org/find a doctor. We appreciate your support, and we certainly look forward to having you join us again on another episode of Adjusted Reality.